Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Sammie Bennett, and we will be discussing writing about trauma recovery. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Sammie, welcome to the program.
Hello, Bruce. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. My name is Sammie Bennett. I'm the author of The Upside Down Forest, which is Fables on Trauma Recovery. I have written some previous novels, poetry. I've done some acting. I'm also a mother to two and a wife, and I live in Orlando, Florida.
And not to I want to make sure, yes, but you forgot someone that I was going to ask you about at the end, but I will ask you about now. You wrote that you have a wild dog.
Luna. How could I forget to include Luna in my introduction? And we actually have two guinea pigs since I wrote that. So I was incredibly inaccurate. Let me do that again. I'm the mother of two human children, two guinea pigs, and one wild dog.
Well, I don't know what to do right now. Such an
My
oversight.
apologies. I'll do better.
I can remember when someone was getting an award and he forgot to thank his wife. And at the very end, he said, "Oh my God, I forgot to thank my wife, and she's within throwing distance of the bottle she's holding." And that was great. All right. So you have a Freudian dislike of canines. We've established that. What's trauma? Now, what just happened is not traumatic. It's funny, and it's of no importance. Even the dogs wouldn't be overly offended. But that's not trauma. Making a mistake isn't trauma. Forgetting something isn't traumatic, or shouldn't be. What's trauma?
That's an excellent question. And I can only speak to how I would define it from my lens. So yeah. I am a survivor of childhood trauma. So I'm very familiar with what's called complex PTSD. So that's when I experienced regular and consistent harm as a child when my brain was forming. So when there's trauma is a spectrum, right? Just like anything, like there's big T trauma and, little T trauma and, everything in between. Specifically, when I say that I'm writing about trauma recovery, I am mostly talking about the kind of events and experiences that really deeply impact our brains and really deeply impact how we move through the world on a daily basis.
Why is, I don't want to say writing because that can relate to keeping a diary or a journal. Why is publishing, by which I mean, and today everybody says they're a published author, but all they've done is paid somebody for printing and binding of their book. But why is publishing a good therapy? In other words, sharing with the world what you went through, therapeutic for the victim?
No, that's a good question. I think specifically to answer your question about publishing, why I went that extra step of having written these stories, why did I then want to share them with others? And, I would like to say it was entirely altruistic, that I wanted to share, something of I've learned through all of this with other survivors. But I do think that there is an element of really wanting to be heard. And I think so many survivors, we weren't heard. We really didn't have a voice. And so I do think there is something really specifically empowering about publishing and sharing that speaks directly to the voice that was stifled when I was younger. So I think there's definitely a correlation there.
Why and you're not the only one by any means, why take the path of writing a novel? Because a novel by definition is fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just write an autobiography and say, this is what I went through, this is what I learned from it, and this is what you should take away? Why is the novel a good medium?
I really didn't set out to have these stories be on trauma recovery. I am a fiction writer by trade. That is what I love to do. That is what I did throughout my 20s before all of this trauma sort of came up and out through counseling. I was writing before all of that. And then all of this started coming up and out, and I was in a really intense counseling place. And I couldn't write. I didn't write at all. I journaled, but I didn't write at all. I know some people can. I was not able to at that point. So I didn't write for several months. I think it was probably over a year. And I started writing again. And I wrote fiction because that's what I write. That's what I loved as a child. That's what answered so many questions for me as a child. And it is still my first love to this day. So when I started writing these stories, these fiction stories, I didn't plan on writing about trauma recovery. I was just going to write, honestly, children's books, which I love. And there's something so specific about writing to children. I mean, that's a whole other subject I could go into. But I really love and respect children's literature. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. There'll be a shorter story form. It'll be a way for me to get back into writing. Maybe I can do a longer form down the road, but this will be a great entry back into writing. So I wasn't going to write about trauma. I was going to write about, squirrels and acorns, and I was going to write these picture books, and I had it all planned. And I started writing, and I would submit these stories that I was writing to my writers group, which are these two lovely women, Heather and Christina, who very gently were like, just asking me some follow-up questions, like, you seem to talk a lot about this dragon. Like, does the dragon represent? So I wasn't even trying to, but I ended up writing about what I was going through with my counseling through these stories. And why fiction for me? I think it was a way in. I think it was an entry point. I don't know if I could have, and I know people do, and I respect it. I don't know if I could have sat down and written a memoir, a detailed memoir right off the bat. I think for me that these stories were a way into writing, and a way into writing who I was becoming, and honestly who I'd always been, but getting to write it in a way where I was coming at it a little bit at the side, so covering these really hard topics, but coming at it from an angle or from an entry point that felt familiar to me. I've loved fairy tales since I was teeny tiny. And so I think that this was a way where I could use these archetypes, where I could use, a dragon and a queen, and I could use these archetypes instead of, some more triggering words that would also represent, those characters. So yeah, for me, I think it's because it's what I could do at the time. That's what I could write.
Is it possible to recover from trauma? Meaning that the trauma is gone, doesn't come back? Or is it, for lack of a better analogy, like alcoholism? You're always going to be a recovering alcoholic. You're always going to, you may be able to stop drinking, but you're still a recovering alcoholic. You have been traumatized, you have the trauma maybe back in the deepest recesses of your mind, and you control it, but it's always there. So can you really recover from trauma, or can you just learn how to control it so it doesn't control you?
Yeah. So I think, to some extent, both. I think that healing is 100% possible with trauma. What they're learning about brain plasticity and building new neural pathways, like that's all real. Like that is incredible.
Mhm.
And so have I experienced healing since starting all of this? Yes. Have I experienced it to the extent where it's actually impacted how much I experience depression and anxiety just in my day-to-day life? Yes. Like it has actually, like there has been real healing. Can I still get startled and do like the startle reflex when my husband comes into the room? Yes. So do I, is my brain still traumatized? Yes, it is. I can get to hypervigilance real fast. So in some ways it's a yes. And yes, I still am working with a brain that has experienced a ton of trauma. Yes, I have experienced a ton of healing to that traumatized brain, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. I'm thinking of the veterans that I work with who have suffered from or who suffer from PTSD.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I tell them to do, and I tell everybody to do this, is if you have a health problem, bring it up at the very first interview and say, listen, I know you can't ask me, but I'm going to volunteer to tell you. We'll just use PTSD as the example. I suffer from PTSD. This is what it means, and this is the reasonable accommodation that I will need you to provide in order for me to fulfill the requirements of the job. We're not talking here about the requirement of the job is to be able to lift 50 pounds. And the person just can't lift 50 pounds. Well, you can't do the job. You're not going to get the job. It's as simple as that. You can't fulfill the requirements. But if your reasonable accommodation is just being able to close the door and call your counselor, then it's not a problem. I can't think of right now of a single instance that was not the reasonable accommodation. Of course, employers are more than happy to provide that. They don't mind. They don't care. They want the best possible employee they can. What accommodation is necessary for someone who is dealing with childhood trauma, an adult who is dealing with childhood trauma?
Specifically accommodations in the workplace?
In the workplace.
Or
Or
just
however you want to answer.
Yeah.
However you want to answer.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And the example you brought up is a good one. I also think just allowing for some margin in the day.
Explain what you mean by margins.
Yeah, just a little bit of downtime. Just even if we have just like a 15-minute break every 2 hours where we could go outside, and it's on us to have our tools and to know how to get regulated and all of that. But to have someone come alongside and give us the space to do that and the space to do the work that we know to do would be huge. So the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that is margin, is having some time built in the workday where you could have 15 minutes and apart from lunchtime, but just some time to recalibrate, which honestly I think would be good for all humans. But is certainly good for survivors to be able to use our tools to, like you suggested, make the phone call if you need to, or go outside or journal. It's amazing how quickly, and again, not to minimize, because sometimes it can take a long time, but when it's a minor trigger or something that's just gotten me dysregulated, if someone gives me a little bit of time and space, because I've been given a lot of tools, I can get myself regulated again if I'm, given the time to do so. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, is if they could just have some breaks, just even like a 15-minute one in the morning and a 15-minute one in the afternoon. It could be huge.
What do you feel is the role of medication in dealing with trauma?
I will tell you that medicine has definitely been a part of my journey. And I wish I had started taking it sooner. But I can't go back in time. And I'm thankful that I started taking it when I took it. I think I had a lot of pride around taking it. I think I felt a lot of shame around taking it, that if I had done better through these other avenues, if I had just been better at counseling, or I had been better at, fill in the blank, these other, options, that I wouldn't need to take medicine, when really medicine has played such a huge part in me being able to do the counseling and being able to do the, like the other tools. It's not an either or. Medicine has been such a huge part in making the space. Like if we're looking at it percentages, like it can maybe help me out 20-40%, but it gives me that much more availability to be present for counseling and to make inroads faster than I would if I wasn't on medicine. And again, this is just my experience, and I have a great psychiatrist who matched me with the right medicine. And I know everybody's journey is different, but for me, it has been a game changer. And I'm still on medicine. And I don't know if I'll be, one who's on it for many years to come, or if it was just for a season. I'm not sure, but I will tell you what, I no longer feel shame about taking medicine. And I think that it plays a part in some of our stories.
And speaking of stories, why is it that you wrote that you ultimately fell in love with the short story structure?
Yeah.
Why short stories and not a long story, a novel, an epic? I'm not
I
thinking.
think so.
No, I was just going to say I'm not thinking a Homeric poem, but a book of some magnitude instead of a short story,
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
series of short stories. I don't know if you
Mhm.
write one short story, one and done, or if it's a series of short stories.
Yeah, so this one is a collection.
Okay.
But specifically why I love the short story. So in my writers group, I'm always the editor. I'm always like, how can we get this down? Least amount of words possible. Like I'm always cutting stuff. And I love plain writing. I love I love people who can tell me a story in a succinct amount of time. And I think I love the challenge of a short story because it's kind of like a puzzle. You only have this many words. You only have this much time. And you're wanting to convey a whole arc. And you're wanting to create a world that actually brings your reader into your world and keeps them, but you don't have a lot of time to do that. I mean, it's limited just by the nature of the form. And so I think the puzzler in me loves that aspect of it, loves the challenge of wanting to tell a story that matters and a story that really takes the reader into the world, even if it's just for a short time, but to do so efficiently. And also, just to be honest, I still read novels, and I still do read long form stuff, but my attention span is not what it used to be. And so I do find that I like things that I can read that are, in nuggets and that are a little more palatable if I'm, having a really busy day. So for a lot of reasons, I think I really like the short form.
It's funny you should say that because I used to enjoy reading hours a day, long books. I still would like to be able to, but I can't because of my eyes. So I limit myself to approximately 50 pages a day. And when I say that to people, they go, 50 pages a day? That's so much. For me, it's a fraction of what I'm used to. So it really is subjective what a short book is and what a long book is.
That's true.
How do you write in such a way that people will appreciate your journey, but won't feel sorry for you?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. And I think all I can do is try to tell the best story that I can. And unfortunately, I can't really control how my reader, responds and what they take away from it. But I know that I can try to write an excellent story. And I know that I can really just try to offer a engaging, an entertaining, a meaningful story where hopefully the shift goes from me, the author, to the story. Another reason I really love plain writing is I really love to get lost in a story. And I hope that my readers, when they're reading this, yes, I have forwards and stuff where I'm sharing a little bit of my story, but most of the time you're going to spend in my book are in the stories. And that's where I want my reader to be. Could they feel sorry for me with the parts of my story that I share? Yes, they could. But if I've done a good job as a storyteller, hopefully it's the story that's engaging them. And hopefully it's the story that lingers with them and not, me, the author, if that makes sense.
Sammie, I want to thank you. And before I let you go, I want to share your contact information. I will make us magically appear. And I have and just to our viewers, dog lovers who wish to write into assail you should do it through Instagram. Do not contact me. I didn't do it. I pointed it out. It's her fault.
All me.
On you. Final question.
Yes.
Is there anything I did not ask you that you wish I did ask you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
There's not. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. Thank you. Thank you for the range of questions. It was really good to talk to you.
Was my pleasure, and I have all the respect in the world for people who come on and are willing to share their most personal and intimate experiences. So I give you a lot of credit for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.